Bonjour and enchanté. This is going to be my build today of Metal Earth's Icon X Premium Series, and this is of the Arc de Triomphe that's located in Paris, France. And so as you can see, this is a premium model, so it comes with a really cool box where you can open up to kind of see the parts inside before you have to open it up completely. But it's just 2 sheets of metal, which is actually great because it's actually a simple build considering that it's a premium series. It is a larger size than your typical Metal Earth buildings, but I think it looks really great. The metals are very shiny and very polished. It has really great engravings on it with a lot of detail, but the build itself is relatively simple. And like other Metal Earth models, it comes with an instructional manual that shows you how to build this model, and it will show you where to bend the tab versus where to twist the tab using the icons in their instructional manual. These are some of my images that I took in Paris of the Arc de Triomphe, and we actually got to go up top using the spiral staircase, and on the top you get to have a 360 view of Paris, and you can see the Grand Arc, and you can see the Eiffel Tower, and pretty much you can see a lot of the historic landmarks from the top of the Arc de Triomphe. And so whenever I remove pieces from the sheet, I use my wire snipper to actually snip the little tabs that are connected to the sheet to remove it, and it's actually a lot easier to just use the wire snipper than any other method. And they do have a little indentation of where you can put the snippers in between and be able to snip off really easily. So the best way to describe the build mentality for this model is, think of it like an upside down cake, where you're going to be adding layers upon layers to finish the cake in a sense. And the reason why I say that is just because the steps in between are actually very identical for the most part, where you're going to be putting 2 sheets of L-shaped pieces together to create a rectangle base, and then you're going to be putting that onto a plate, and then you're going to have the top of the plate be bent down to kind of create the little trim pieces around each layer. And so this is kind of like, an analogy to a cake in a sense, but you would be creating the cake not from the bottom up, but from the top down. So I have an interesting story about when I visited the Arc de Triomphe. I actually visited Paris back in 2010 with my friend HJ, and we were visiting the Louvre that day, and we decided to take a walk from the Louvre to the Arc de Triomphe. And so I was telling her, like, looking at the map, going, okay, so we're gonna take this road all the way down. It's a boulevard, and it's gonna lead us straight through to the Arc de Triomphe, and if we continue, we can actually go to the Grand Arc. And my friend was like, well, that's great, but if we're gonna walk down a street, the street that I really want to visit in Paris more than anything else is, I really want to see Champs-Élysées. And she was like, if we can we actually spend the time to walk on Champs-Élysées instead of walking down the street? And I kind of had to point out to her by looking at the map, going, can you please look at the road to see what the road is called? And when she looked at it, she didn't realize that the road that connects from the Louvre to the Arc de Triomphe is the Champs-Élysées. She had no idea. She just knew about like 2 or 3 things about Paris that she wanted to see, and one of them was Champs-Élysées, and the other one was Sacré-Cœur. And speaking of Sacré-Cœur, she actually didn't know Sacré-Cœur by its name. In Korea, I guess, it's very famous, the Montmartre Hills. So, they will always just talk about the Montmartre Hills and the church, the white church on top of the Montmartre Hills. And so when I told her that, we're going to be visiting Notre Dame, and then we're going to be visiting, Sacré-Cœur, and she was like, well, Notre Dame, of course, I want to see, but if we're going to see any other church, can we please go to the Montmartre Hills instead? Like, I want to actually visit Montmartre Hills. just because I don't know anything about Sacré-Cœur, so that doesn't sound interesting. And so, can we go to Sacré-Cœur, or sorry, can we go to Montmartre Hills? And I kind of told her to just be quiet and just come with me. And then when we got off of the subway exit and we got out in front of the Moulin Rouge, and then I started pointing at her to the hillside, and she was like, "Oh, this is the Montmartre Hills. This is where I wanted to go." And I had to kind of tell her, yeah, so the church on top of the Montmartre Hills is called Sacré-Cœur. So you and I were actually talking about the same location this whole time. And it was just kind of the same thing with the Arc de Triomphe, or actually in this case it was the Champs-Élysées. But this happened a lot throughout our trip, where we would actually be talking about the same location, but we were probably knowing it as different things, and she got really confused the whole time we were traveling. I really loved Paris when I visited back in 2010. The people were very nice, and I just had a great time the whole time I was there. It's actually one of my favorite cities that I visited, and is one of the few places that I actually visited that was outside of California, where I actually was like, I can actually imagine myself living here. And so I fell in love with Paris deeply. And I was supposed to go, and I was going to take my parents with me to France this year, back in March, and we had everything planned, and I booked all the hotels and wine tastings and everything all figured out. But as you know, around March is when they started doing the lockdowns, and the pandemic for the COVID-19 started to really hit multiple countries. And this is kind of right when France was having a huge surge of cases, and so my parents didn't feel comfortable going, so we ended up actually canceling a trip to Paris, which I was bummed about. But it's better to be safe than sorry. So unfortunately I didn't get to go again, but I'm hoping to go back again soon, maybe after this pandemic, just to revisit Paris to see if I still kind of have the same love that I had for the city about 10 years ago. So I was actually just Wikipedia in the Arc de Triomphe just to see if there's any interesting facts. And the four sculptures that are on the base of the building, which you saw earlier, each one actually is a very specific sculpture, and I guess there are four names for it. And so one of them is Le Départ de 1792, the second one is Le Triomphe de 1810, the third one is La Résistance de 1814, and then the fourth one is Le Pas de 1815. And I'm sorry if I butchered any of the pronunciations. I never actually learned how to speak French, except for maybe like a small audiobook to kind of pick up conversational French. And this was right before we were gonna go to Paris, which we ended up canceling. So if you ever plan on visiting Arc de Triomphe, if I remember correctly, once we got to in front of it, we actually had to go underground, because there's an underpass located at the Champs-Élysées, and once you get down there, you will actually take a lift almost to the top, and there's going to be a small museum, and there's an actual camera located in the center of the arch looking down, and then there's a big screen inside once you're inside the Arc de Triomphe, where it shows you where you're standing and what the view is straight down from that location. So once you're in the small museum inside the attic, you have the spiral staircase that's about 40 steps that you have to climb up to get to the roof terrace. And from the roof terrace is where you can enjoy a 360 panorama view of Paris. It shows a very great view of Paris, especially because it's kind of located in the center of everything. So you get to see, the Grand Arc, you can see the Eiffel Tower. But my only problem was that once you're standing on the Arc de Triomphe, or let's say you're viewing the panorama view from the Eiffel Tower, you're actually missing the one landmark, let's say. So if you're on the Arc de Triomphe, you don't get to see the Arc de Triomphe. And so my suggestion, if you're ever going to visit, is to actually try to go onto the rooftop of the Sacré-Cœur on Montmartre Hills, because when you're there, you can actually kind of see the rest of Paris. So you get to kind of see all three landmarks, pretty easily. You're gonna see it very small in certain locations, so like, you know, like the Grand Arc, it's not that visible, but you can still see it. So, you know, I would say the best view of Paris to me was the Montmartre Hills. I apologize for not talking too much about the build itself. The only reason why I decided not to really talk about the build process was, as you can see, it's very repetitive and it's very simple. So once you kind of figure out how to do the top roof terrace and you kind of get used to that, it's just the same process over and over again. And as you can see, the final model, it looks great. I really like this premium series Icon X from Metal Earth, because all of the models I built so far from the Icon X series have been very great, high detail, high quality, and these are some of the final images. And so, you know, this is the build of the Arc de Triomphe. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and if you liked watching this video, please subscribe to my channel, and you know, or watch other videos that may be on my channel if you like these type of videos. And I have a lot more videos that I still have to go through, but thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy more of my videos.